With us, the one, the only Joe Klein. Welcome.
Good to be back, the one, the only Tim Russell.
All right. We're going to talk about the National a little bit, but let me talk about your return to weekly journalism, column in Time magazine, in the arena, after several years writing for The New Yorker.
6 years.
6 years. Why did you come back to the weekly grind?
It just turns out that there aren't any 12-step programs for people with my particular addiction.
You are a junkie, Klein.
I'm totally a junkie. And, you know, I left The New Yorker full-time after the 2000 election. I've been doing it for 30 years. I went to school for a while. I went to Columbia, took some classes.
In what?
One was in first century religion, another was art history, which I had never taken when I was in college, just to clear my mind a little bit and try to figure out what I missed about my work, what I really love doing the best. You know, I write novels, I write books like The Natural, I write long pieces for The New Yorker, but the thing that I really missed was writing columns, and that was intensified after September 11th. You know, I felt that I've been doing this for a long time, and I have a certain amount of institutional memory to offer, and also I just love doing it. I love being out there every week and seeing things and reacting to them immediately from my gut.
I think, you know, when you're in a war, likability may not mean that much. I mean, you know, to my mind, the one factor that has meant the most in the television era is warm versus cold, likability versus non-like. And the only time there was an exception to that was in 1968 when Richard Nixon beat Hubert Humphrey. Why? Because the country was in chaos. And they wanted somebody who seemed strong, firm, and in control. And believe it or not, people thought of that of Richard Nixon at that point. So I think that the likability thing may be off the table this time as well, if I'm right in saying that people are concerned about America's place in the world and this very wobbly situation we have in Iraq and in the War on Terror. There are two standard cliches of American politics. So you hear politicians say them all the time. We are at a crossroads in American history, or we're at a crossroads of something. I started my life as a journalist in working for the Peabody Times in Massachusetts, and I remember one of the first races I covered was literally a race for dog catcher. And one of the candidates said we are at a crossroads in the history of canine removal and control in Peabody. You know, and I used to give speeches and say, we're never at a crossroads of anything in this country. This country is in wonderful shape, even though we have our problems. But I'm going to have to abide by that cliche tonight and say that we are at a crossroads of sorts right now in the country. It's something we have to think about seriously. A statesman, if he or she is worth their weight in salt, looks at the world in a different way, thinks about the challenges that the country is going to be facing, thinks about what we need to do to get there, thinks about your children and your grandchildren and mine. And all too often over the last 40 years during the television era, that kind of thinking has suffered compared to concern about the news cycle, the message of the week, the election to come. For most of the last 60 years, politics has been a silvery cloud slightly dimming the brilliance of the eternal American sunshiny day. Most people made the decision that what these guys, and they've been mostly guys, are talking about isn't going to affect my life one way or another, and they're full of it in any case. And so during that time, we've lost the habits of citizenship. One of the stories that my folks tell about Franklin Roosevelt that always had an impact on me was that at the beginning of World War II, he gave a fireside address and he told everybody to go out and buy maps of the world and buy boxes of little pins so that they could follow the progress of American troops up the chain of islands in the Pacific and across Africa and then Europe. He became, in effect, the nation's geography teacher. And people talk about what George Bush could have done on September 12th. He could have called for sacrifice, but he always also had a responsibility to educate us. The president is the educator-in-chief. It's time for us to create a new culture of citizenship in this country. As I said, I'm a romantic, and I'm pretty optimistic that we've come through a really bad time through the television age. My friend Adam Walensky, who I mentioned before, once said to me, television ruins everything. He was talking about professional basketball at the time, but it's true. There's something to that, and we're now in another age. We are in television/internet age, where candidates are going to have to be more interactive. And so your impact on them is going to increase. And so I'm not letting you off the hook. I'll try and do my job, but please, 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 try and do yours.